gosh, so I want to do a little bit more reading than I normally do from the inspired talks. There's just a little piece in here that I just was so excited about. It just gave so many different options for really thinking deeply about our condition and the situation that we're in and what truth is and how to get there. How do we observe it? How do we see it? Or how do we be it? Anyway, he says, the Sanskrit word for sat, which is the word from Satchitananda, right? He says the Sanskrit word for truth is sat, isness. That's interesting, huh? The word for isness is the same as the word for truth. Quite lovely. So that means our own I am is our only thing that we can be sure of. It's the one piece of knowledge that needs no evidence, no proof, right? We're not going to argue. I exist. That's this isness. That's truth. From our present standpoint, this world appears to us as will and consciousness. The personal God is as real as we are ourselves, and no more. Now that's interesting, that God is as real as we are, because we're pretty certain that we're real in our present condition. But he puts those two little words at the end there, and no more, meaning that our own reality is at some level questionable, our own existence as an I, as this personality, body, mind that I think myself to be. And he attaches that to God, indicating or telling us that God is as real as we are in this condition. That God is absolutely real if we believe ourselves to be absolutely real. So that's a particular plane of perspective, a plane of seeing. But he's saying that there is a possibility that we're not real. And if we ever come to know this or understand this, then the situation and relationship between the divine and ourself is going to change. He says God can also be seen as a form, just as we are seen. So it's not that God is a temporary little holding place for people who are not yet akin to the Advaitic perspective, and that we have a make-believe friend that we hang out with. He's absolutely negating that idea. He's saying God is as real as you are, and he can have a form and be seen as you can be seen. So there is a reality to it, but there's a different perspective available to us. He says, as men, we have a God. As God, we need no one. This is why Sri Ramakrishna constantly saw the Divine Mother present with him, more real than any other thing around him. But in Samadhi, all disappeared in the self. The personal God comes nearer and nearer until he melts away. And there is no more personal God and no more I. All is merged in the self. Isn't that beautiful? So that relationship with God is of stellar importance. It is that love that grows between the concept of you and the concept of God that actually both of those concepts merge into pure love, pure, unadulterated, gorgeous, wholesome, happy love. The argument from design claims that intelligence precedes form. But if intelligence is the cause of anything, it is itself, in turn, an effect. So it can't be the cause of anything because it will be caught in that wheel of samsara. It'll be something else's effect. And so it has to be outside of the system, as it were. This is Maya, he says. This is that grand projection, grand illusion, as it were. Not fully illusion because there's something there. There is a screen that this movie is being projected on, this screen of ignorance, or the screen that is projecting our ignorance back to us. So there is something there. It's not full illusion, but this is Maya. The circle is unbroken. Mind creates body and body creates mind. The egg brings forth the chicken and the chicken the egg. The tree the seed and the seed the tree. The world is neither entirely differentiated nor yet entirely homogeneous. Man is free and must rise above both sides. Now that's a very important point right there. The resolution isn't within the system. It's not something we're going to know or learn or see or observe, because it's not that. He says that we have to be free and rise above the whole throng. We're not going to solve the problem by being in the problem. We're going to have to know of a perspective or a self or an existence in isness that supersedes this relative perspective, this particular perspective. Both are right in their place, all right? But to know the truth, isness, we must transcend all that we now know of existence: will, consciousness, doing, going, knowing. So we have to transcend. What is transcend? Transcend means a cutting off of the identity with and climbing the stairs to go above and seeing things not from the perspective of body-mind, but seeing it with a new identity in that unchanging isness, that presence of being. But how wonderfully that ties together this notion of jnana, the path of knowledge, which is always talking about thou art that, I am God. And that always makes me as a bhakti or as a devotional person feel insecure, like, I'm just making up this best friend of mine to hang out with in this time on earth. But how nicely this paragraph really explains it, saying that no, the divine is real. The divine can have form. There is a relationship there. There is a beauty there. There is something to love there, and something that naturally produces love and emanates love, and ultimately is the love that you feel and that you produce and that grows in that relationship. And so I wanted to share those things with you. There's so much in this book. Again, if you have not read this book, or if you don't have this book, get it. It's one of the greatest ones that I've read. This one and The Eternal Companion and Ramakrishna and his disciples. All of these books they're just real seeds for spiritual seekers, spiritual talks. These are just some of my favorites. I Am That by Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj. Of course, the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. And Swamiji really enjoyed The Imitation of Christ. So all of these books, really, read them, but just read them slowly. Read a paragraph or two. Read it several times in a sitting, and spend at least half of that sitting time not reading, but contemplating what you've read, looking at each word and letting it mean exactly what it means, and trying to compare it to your worldview, to your experience of self, to see what's going to give here, what's going to break when this egg opens and I see the universe as myself.